Our story begins with a tall stone tower and an asylum perched atop it. Our protagonist ascends the stairs to reach it. Once at the top, he frustratingly ponders why he always ends up there whenever he dreams. He sighs, realizing it has been 5 years, yet there he still was, dreaming about that damned asylum every day. He ventures inside, feeling as though the asylum is forever summoning him, yet never truly permitting him entry. The entire situation strikes him as bizarre. He knocks forcefully on the massive door, shouting for someone inside to acknowledge his presence. He recognizes that within this dream, devoid of logic, any attempts to make sense of it all are futile. All he can do is to keep knocking, day and night, over and over again. Then, he hears a knock at his own door, accompanied by a voice urging him to wake up because it's time to eat. He awakens, assuring them he'll be right there and that they should start without him. He sits up on his bed, sighing from the exhaustion of knocking on that elusive door all night once again. Ever since that fateful day, he became not only mentally unstable, but also blind. Or more specifically, his perception of the world had changed. The sounds of his aunt cooking and his little cousin reprimanding their dog echo through the house. His aunt informs him that the doctor is waiting in the study for his re-examination, and that he should go and let the doctor examine him. He responds with a reassuring smile and an okay. The doctor asks him to confirm if he's Lin Kai and if he's 17 years old. He replies affirmatively. The doctor inquires about the accident that led to his mental illness and blindness a decade ago. Kai explains it all began on that night 10 years ago. While on the roof, gazing at the moon, he was astounded because he saw an angel, one dressed in a golden haze, unfurling 6 golden wings. The doctor asks if it was a seraph, and he agrees, explaining that since that day, he has been unable to open his eyes. As the doctor prepares to document his mental state, Kai interrupts, revealing that all he has shared is simply his imagination. The doctor pauses, visibly confused. Kai goes on to explain that he merely fell from the roof, hit his head, and damaged his nerves, leading to his blindness. The doctor ponders for a moment before acknowledging his understanding. Subsequently, he marks Kai's mental state as normal. As the doctor prepares to leave, he encourages Kai to adjust his mental state and move forward in life. Kai expresses gratitude and offers to see the doctor out as a sign of respect. Later, as they sit at the table eating, his little cousin asks if his eyes are nearly healed. He confirms, explaining that while his eyes are improving, he still suffers from photophobia. His aunt advises him not to worry about his eyes and to take things slow, avoiding pushing himself too hard. Kai simply replies, "Alright." His aunt informed him that his school transfer had already been dealt with, but she asked him if he had really thought it through. He replied that there were no ifs and his eyes were healing, so if he wanted to go to college, he had to be on the same starting line as others. His aunt sweetly told him that it was alright if he couldn't get into college because she would take care of him for his whole life, and his little cousin also told him that he would take care of him too. However, the truth was, he lied because his eyes hadn't healed at all, and he still couldn't open them, not even the slightest, and even if he tried extremely hard, he couldn't open them. Still, he wasn't lying at the same time because even though his eyes were closed, he could still see his surroundings. Ever since 5 years ago, his eyes started to change, allowing him to sense his environment. It started at only a few centimeters, then it became longer and clearer as time went by, and currently it extended up to 10 meters. He knew that if a person's sight range was only 10 meters, then he was still somewhat of a blind person. But to him, that 10 meters meant everything. Then, he heard the angel from a distance asking him if he was still looking at him. He sighed and turned around to go to bed, knowing that he was going to be knocking in his dream again, not hearing something rustling under their apartment building. A monster peeked while hiding behind the street pole, then it cut the street pole to hit the people chasing after it. The monsters ran away while the people in the red robes were chasing them. One of them called old Zhao for a signal. The man who was lighting a cigarette replied that he got it. Zhao inhaled the cigarette and said that the 3 signposts were all in place. Then, he positioned his fingers into a 3 and activated the forbidden ruins. He placed his fingers on the ground, and a red powerful light emerged from underground, surrounding him. He then ordered it to open, causing the red powerful light to become stronger and shoot up to the sky, releasing a powerful barrier. The monsters stopped running when they saw the red light blocking their way, and one of them tried to put its hand through it, but its hand got burned. Then, someone appeared behind them and told them not to bother trying. The person took off her robe cap and the lady told the monsters that they were not getting out of that array. The monsters looked at her and ran towards her to attack, but she just stood still and told them that the elimination was starting now. The next day at school, Kai arrived with his cane. A girl shyly looked at him, thinking him incredibly handsome. Despite it being his first day of high school, Kai felt prepared. A moment later, in one of the schoolrooms, the teacher informed her students that they would be welcoming a special student. She asked them if everyone could lend a hand to help him acclimate to the class. She reflected on how, in the previous term, all the social groups had already formed in class. As a transfer student, fitting in would be challenging, especially for Kai, given his disability. The exclusion he might face seemed almost inevitable. Nevertheless, he didn't find the prospect too disheartening, thinking at least he could focus on studying. Suddenly, a girl took his arm and guided him to his seat. The other students helped as well, some taking his bag, others pulling out his chair for him, which left him shocked. A few hours later, after the teacher dismissed the class, the students crowded around Kai. They asked which school he transferred from, what happened to his eyes, and whether it was due to an accident. The girl who had first helped him introduced herself as Jong Kayan, the class leader, and assured him that he could approach her for anything. The boy who helped him with his bag introduced himself as Lee Yifei and offered to accompany him to the cafeteria whenever he wanted to eat. Another boy introduced himself as Liu Yuan. Kai wondered why things were different from what he had expected and asked them if they knew him. Kayan replied that their homeroom teacher had instructed them to, but before she could finish her words, Yifei informed him that his aunt had come a few days prior and asked them to take good care of him while he was there. Yifei further explained that on that day, his aunt had stood by the door, handing out candies one by one as she begged them to look after him. Kai then pictured his aunt telling everyone that he merely appeared cold. But in fact, he was a warm-hearted kid, all the while distributing candies. However, Kayan regarded Yifei with a suspicious look. Later, he was concentrating on what their teacher was saying. About 100 years ago, there were still around 200 countries spread across the continents and 4 oceans. One day, an endless fog appeared in Antarctica. He was thinking that he couldn't let his aunt's efforts be in vain. The teacher continued, explaining that the mystical and poisonous fog spread at an alarming rate, engulfing 98% of the Earth's surface within 24 hours. It was unlike anything humans had ever known. Additionally, no exploration device could penetrate its surface, and no one knew whether the other countries beyond the fog still existed, or if they were the last survivors. Meanwhile, in some sewers, a huge monster emerged. But before it could attack, a blade split it in half, revealing a woman in the center. More monsters rushed towards them to attack, prompting the woman to order her people to kill them all and not let any escape. The Night Watcher, when Chemo, replied that he understood. The woman shouted to her team that they only needed to block that sewer and the monsters would have nowhere to escape. Then she swung her blade at the monsters, cutting them in half and casting them aside. As she walked back to her team, she told them that no matter how many monsters came, they were no match for her. Suddenly, Chemo fearfully called out the woman's name, Hong Yin, to warn her to look behind. A huge monster appeared behind her, and as she turned around to check, the monster swiftly stabbed her with its claws before she could react. It then flung her away. Her team was shocked and ran towards her in worry, shouting her name. Although she was near death, she still tried to report the misjudgment in the operation. Unfortunately, she collapsed before she could finish. Meanwhile, they were walking home, engaging in a discussion about a psychopath who had claimed roughly 10 lives in the Old Town area. This prompted Kayan to vehemently question their morbid fascination, accusing them of merely trying to scare others. Suddenly, Kai detected an unusual scent and halted in his tracks, contemplating if it was the stench of decay. He beckoned the others to pause and asked if they too detected the foul odor. As they peered into an open space, Yuan concurred that he also sensed the stench now that Kai mentioned it, suggesting they should investigate. Unbeknownst to them, they were not alone in this location. As Yuan activated his cell phone flashlight, the beam revealed a blood-soaked woman, leaving them frozen in shock. Fearfully, they cried for help while observing the woman, who was currently being assaulted by a monster. The creature tossed the woman onto the ground and let out an enraged scream at the group. Yifei, overcoming his initial shock, yelled to his friends, urging them not to remain idle and instead flee. Panic ensued as they tried to escape, but Kai was left behind, struggling to untangle the string of his cane from his hand. Fortunately, he managed to free himself and took off, fully aware of the monster in close pursuit. Kayan looked back for Kai, but he urged her not to. Upon seeing the creature dangerously close to Kai, Kayan instinctively hurled her bag over her shoulder, not realizing she could inadvertently hit Kai. Luckily, Kai dodged, and her bag struck the monster. Just as Kayan was nearing the exit, another monster materialized and violently bit into her head. Stunned momentarily, Kai abruptly regained his senses upon noticing the second monster. It lunged at him, but he managed to evade. Realizing his only choice was to fight back, Kai swung his cane at the creature. Despite another aggressive swing, the monster managed to attack him from behind, causing him to roll on the ground, bounce, and slide. During the process, his calf was injured, yet his concern was elsewhere as he called out to Kyan in worry. Unfortunately, Kyan was already becoming the second monster's meal. While one monster was occupied devouring Kyan, another started to approach Kai, only for a third to appear overhead. As it prepared to pounce, Kai couldn't help but question his ill fortune. Memories of years of hardship, blindness, and being labeled a psychopath flooded back. Despite his past adversity, he had always survived. Now, just as he was ready to turn over a new leaf and embrace a fresh start, he was confronted by these grotesque beasts. With a defiant yell, he declared his refusal to accept this fate, triggering a brilliant gold light to radiate from his eyes. Despite the visual spectacle, the monster lunged at him. An angel, hearing his cry, surveyed the earth and fixed its gaze on the ongoing conflict. Simultaneously, a monster's attack severed Kai's calf. His eyes opened, unleashing an intense golden light. Suddenly, a powerful, golden aura erupted from him, surging up towards the sky with a rumble. Meanwhile, somewhere, Zhao was sprinting through the streets, clutching a street post, and asking Hong Ying what was happening. Kimo informed Zhao that the elimination operation had failed, and they had been ambushed by the King of Ghost Masks. Furthermore, Hong Ying was severely injured. Infuriated, Zhao asked Kimo how many ghost masks had escaped and if any had infiltrated the residential area. Kimo replied that 3 had entered the Old Town area and were southwest of him. Zhao affirmed that he would intercept them. Suddenly, Zhao halted when a powerful golden light appeared, causing him to reel in surprise, wondering if it signified the emergence of a new forbidden ruin. Kimo and the others also noticed the golden light. Kimo was aware that the force was immensely strong, suggesting it might be someone more powerful than the 5th boundary. However, he then realized it had even reached the 6th boundary, climb. Zhao resumed his sprint, pondering how such a powerful individual could emerge in a small city like Kangnan. Meanwhile, back at the base, the man monitoring Kai speculated that this was not a typical human's forbidden ruin, but more akin to a god's ruin. Concurrently, God Code 3 and the King of Angels, Michael, arrived. Michael examined Kai's hand, remarking that it had been a decade since he last observed the world up close. Monsters poised themselves to attack and lunge towards him, but he dodged the attack, deeming it too slow. Kai observed that not only his reaction speed but also his sensory range had doubled. Within a 20-meter radius, he could perceive everything. He fly on the ground, and one of the monsters instantly leapt to assault him. However, a mere glare from him, and the emergence of Michael from his body, left the monster frozen in fear. Kai twirled his cane, gripped it tightly, and thrust it into the head of one monster. The cane pierced through, hitting another at the back. The monster dropped dead on the ground. Suddenly, he felt a wave of dizziness and collapsed, realizing his inability to move. A golden light erupted from his body, causing him to scream in pain. The monsters watched in confusion. Recognizing his guard was down, they leapt towards him to attack. He was in pain, but he knew that he couldn't dodge the monster's attack. Fortunately, someone arrived and drew his sword. Then he swung it toward the monster's tongue, causing it to burn. Zhao blocked the monster's attack, which was on the verge of hitting him. This surprised Zhao, who then swung his sword in the air with such force that it cut the monster in half. Kai watched Zhao from behind, thinking about how strong he was and wondering what exactly Zhao was. Zhao reported to his team that the elimination was complete and that they should let the logistics division clean up the area. Zhao exhaled smoke from his cigarette and asked him if that was cool, which confused him. Zhao excitedly asked him again if his move earlier was cool. Zhao also invited him to join and be as cool, but he declined, shocking Zhao, who then asked why not. He replied that it was too risky, but Zhao still suggested that they should change locations and have a nice, long chat. He introduced himself as Zhao Kencheng and assured him that he was not a bad guy. He told Zhao that he believed him and that he needed to grab his bag because his textbooks were still in there. Zhao told him to go ahead and make it quick. Later, Zhao was frustrated because despite using all his charms, he still couldn't win Kai over. A moment later, Kai arrived home and his little cousin asked him why he was home so late. He merely replied that it was nothing and asked if his cousin had finished his homework. His little cousin replied that he was nearly done. Kai walked toward the stairs, telling his little cousin that he was a bit tired, so he was going to bed first. He told his cousin to hurry off to sleep once he had finished his homework. His little cousin agreed, but still asked him if he was really okay. He was stunned for a moment but, smiling, replied that he was fine and that he should go to bed early. Then, he wished his little brother good night, to which his young cousin returned the sentiment. When he was upstairs, his cousin poked their dog, asking if it could detect the scent of blood on Kai's clothes. Kai closed his door and placed his school belongings on a chair. He then lay on his bed, reflecting on how exhausting it was to deal with such an ordeal on his first day of school. He knew the individual trying to recruit him was far from ordinary. Furthermore, he suspected a vast organization lurked behind Zhao, one that was privy to the darker facets of their world. Although he yearned to uncover what had transpired, he knew that once certain secrets were revealed, it would be difficult to extricate himself. He had no desire to play the hero, his sole wish was to safeguard their home. When he fell asleep, he found himself back in the asylum. He sighed in frustration. It was a bitter existence, battling monsters during the day and knocking on doors in his dreams. He approached the massive door, ready to knock again. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, taking him by surprise. He placed his hands on the imposing door, wondering if it would yield this time. Gathering his strength, he pushed forcefully. To his relief, the massive door swung open. Also, the asylum demonstrated that it was a sanctuary for a deity. Kai was overjoyed that the door finally opened. He walked inside, exclaiming that after 5 years, the asylum was finally admitting him. He peeked inside and touched the wall, then noticed something odd and pondered why it looked exactly the same as the asylum where he had once stayed. Then he continued to stroll inside, speculating that his dream was peculiar because the architecture was identical. He halted in an alley and recognized that this section was different. He proceeded into the alley and stopped in front of a room adorned with symbols, questioning if the asylum truly housed a divine being. He turned the doorknob and was astounded as it rotated on its own. The symbols on it glowed, and when the door swung open, a forceful golden light emanated from within. Kai was surprised to discover a lady sitting sadly on the bed. He discerned that the woman seemed unusually large in size. She was quiet and morose, so he decided to introduce himself and inquire about her identity. Suddenly, the system informed him that the woman was named Patient Nix and his mission was to aid Nix in recovering from mental illness. When her recovery progress hit the standard percentages of 1%, 50%, and 100%, he would be granted the opportunity to draw a portion of Nix's power. Additionally, Nix's current progress was at 0%. He then wondered if he was correct in his assumption that Nyx is the goddess of the night from Greek mythology. He referred to the system, but suddenly the system encountered an error and clarified that Nyx is indeed the goddess of night in Greek mythology and one of the original 5 Genesis gods. As the personification of the night, Nyx holds a high rank among the gods and is one of the most powerful in Greek mythology. Her power is so immense that she can bring down both mortals and gods simultaneously. This made him question if a powerful goddess like Nyx could also suffer from mental illness, and if so, which illness she had and how he could cure her. He scrutinized her, wondering if her affliction was depression, OCD, schizophrenia, or delusional disorder. He then asked her if she could hear and understand him. Suddenly, Nyx called out to her child in a loud voice. She then looked at him, but he was perplexed as to how a Greek goddess could speak Chinese. A tear slid down Nyx's face as she joyfully declared that she had finally found her child. He was stunned and shocked. He knew he was raised by his aunt and he didn't have any recollection of his biological parents, leading him to question if Nyx was indeed his mother. She jumped excitedly to embrace him, but when he opened his arms to return the hug, she dashed past him, leaving him astonished and speechless. He slowly turned around to watch her and saw her hugging a bass, referring to it as her child. She also called a cabinet Hypnos one of her children and rushed to embrace it. This made Kai realize that Nyx was truly unwell. Nyx joyfully called out her children's names while hugging various items in the room. He rushed towards her in a panic, imploring her to stop, but then he awoke and sighed in exhaustion, wondering how he should go about curing Nyx. The following day, students whispered to each other, casting glances at Zhao, who was seething with rage. His anger was due to Kai standing him up the previous day, and he openly challenged Kai, stating that he couldn't hide when he was standing right before his school gates. Zhao had initially thought Kai was a formidable figure from the Klein stage. However, he quickly realized that Kai was merely a newbie in the Zhan boundary. Their captain had ordered them to retrieve the Seraph's agent at any cost, refusing to let the ancient god church capture Kai. This mission took precedence over hunting the king of ghost masks. Inhaling his cigarette, Zhao pondered about the captain's well-being and wondered if the pursuit of the king of ghost masks had been successful. As the school gate closed, he heard the distinctive sound of the gate being locked. Filled with frustration, he asked the security guard if the young lad had yet to arrive at school. On the next day, in the hospital, a doctor asked Zhao to confirm whether a friend of his perceives everything as her child, to which Zhao responded affirmatively. The doctor questioned if this friend often spent extended periods crying, and Zhao confirmed this as well. He asked if this friend would recite stories to the vases and chairs in the room, and Zhao responded positively again. Lastly, the doctor inquired about her sleeping habits, and Zhao informed him that she hardly slept. The doctor deduced that it seemed Zhao's friend was seriously ill with a severe delusional disorder. He recommended that Zhao bring her to their hospital for treatment, but Zhao explained that her condition was unique, hence inpatient treatment was out of the question. After a moment of silence, the doctor advised that if hospitalization was not an option, then medication was the only alternative. He could provide some remedies for her to try, but if her condition didn't improve, then she would need to be brought to the hospital. Zhao wondered if medicine from reality could be brought into the dream realm. but he knew that even if he managed to do so, it likely wouldn't affect the gods. Behind him, girls chattered about a middle-aged man. Zhao halted his stride when he noticed Kai approaching him. Zhao was clearly frustrated as he claimed to have been waiting there since 6 in the morning. He had been baking in the sun, yet he still hadn't seen the young lad. As Zhao lifted his head, he saw Kai, causing both to react with surprise. Kai immediately fled despite Zhao's calls for him to wait. Zhao chased after Kai, ordering him to stop, and then cornered him. Zhao landed on the ground and slammed Kai against a wall. Angrily, Zhao asked Kai if he was still planning to run, proudly claiming that he had finally caught him. Kai questioned Zhao's familiarity with him and threatened to scream if he wasn't released. However, Zhao just told him to stop feigning ignorance and stated he wouldn't escape any longer. Zhao then dragged him away, insisting they needed to have a lengthy discussion that day. Kai protested against being dragged and demanded to know their destination. However, Zhao merely replied that all would become clear once they arrived. Later, they reached a love hotel, leaving Kai taken aback. Zhao hauled him towards the entrance, ignoring his panicked queries and mention of hemorrhoids. Zhao just looked at him, speechless. Subsequently, the hotel receptionist observed them with interest. Zhao requested a large, sensual, and intense-themed room, causing Kai to hide his face in embarrassment. He nervously questioned Zhao's choice of such a location for a conversation. Moments later, they found themselves in the requested room. Zhao opened the door and shoved Kai onto the bed. He then demanded that Kai reveal his background and questioned if he had encountered Michael. In September 1922, a fog investigation team discovered a gigantic dragon soaring above the Mariana Trench. Identified as the Dragon of Chaos, Leviathan, this sighting marked the first time in human history a mythical creature had been observed. This phenomenon overturned all preconceived notions of reality. However, to maintain societal stability, the existence of mythical creatures was concealed. Leviathan was codified as one, marking it as the first recorded mythical creature. Moreover, Zhao revealed that the seraph he had seen, named Michael, was the third mythical creature spotted in 1928 and was assigned the code 3. In March 1928, Zhao told of an event where a golden beam shot out from the moon, raising a volcano in North America. This signaled to them the presence of a deity on the moon. Hindered by dense fog, the investigation team spent a year reaching the location. After conducting a thorough examination, they discovered a sealed entity, coded as 4, at the crater's end. This entity was identified as the fallen angel, Lucifer. Concurrently, it became apparent that children born after the fog's appearance could potentially awaken a unique power termed Forbidden Ruins. The strength, range, and specialty of these Forbidden Ruins developed in tandem with the possessor's spiritual power. Zhao explained that the golden light observed the previous night was Michael's power wave, and the activation of his Forbidden Ruins must have coincided with that event. Upon examining his hand, he realized his sensing ability was his Forbidden Ruins, and the dynamic vision and Seraph's divine power he gained after opening his eyes were signs of ability growth. As Zhao poured him a glass of water, he explained that based on the level of spiritual power, Forbidden Ruins were categorized into 6 major stages. The first stage, Jan, was likened to a still cup of water, small and calm. The second stage, Kai, was compared to a pond, full but still. The third stage, Chuan, was analogous to a river, lush and flowing. The fourth stage, Hai, was like the sea, vast and wide. The fifth stage, Endless, was achieved when spiritual power seemed nearly limitless. Finally, the sixth stage, Klein, was reached when spiritual power became inexhaustible, breaking the spatial dimensions like a Klein bottle. He excitedly replied that it was powerful and asked Zhao about his boundary. Zhao replied that he could be considered a particularly strong ordinary person. Kai realized that opening the asylum door might have been a result of him breaking through to the Zhan boundary. He wondered if that meant a patient would appear every time he made a breakthrough. Then, he asked Zhao about his boundary because Zhao seemed incredibly strong. This question made Zhao spit out the water he had just drunk. Zhao awkwardly replied that he didn't have a Forbidden Ruins, and therefore didn't possess spiritual power. This prompted Kai to ask Zhao how he managed to kill those monsters without it. Zhao proudly replied that he used his combat experience and rigorous training. Also, before joining the Night Watcher, he was a Special Forces soldier. Zhao then showed him 3 fingers, explaining that there were 3 ways to acquire Forbidden Ruins. The first was being born with it, as Kai was. The second way was through special Forbidden Ruins items, and the third way was to be granted such power by a god. The gods grant a portion of their own powers to those they choose as their agents in the mortal world. However, these agents also receive orders from their respective gods, and their actions represent the will of the god. Typically, each god has only one agent, and all the agents discovered so far serve under the names of evil gods. They have formed an organization called the Ancient Gods Church, whose goal is to bring chaos back to the world. Zhao then grabbed Kai's shoulder, asking him about Michael's orders and questioning which side he was on. Kai replied that he didn't know because Michael hadn't said anything. Zhao was surprised to hear this and asked him if he had never heard Michael's voice because it didn't make sense. Zhao explained to him that, according to their guesses, Michael was either neutral or on the good side. Michael had given him the Forbidden Rune but said nothing more, so he wondered what Michael was thinking. Kai told Zhao that he didn't care about what Michael was thinking. He declared that even if Michael did give him orders, he wouldn't follow them because he didn't want to get caught up in that kind of mess. Michael can take those eyes back if he wants, he said. Then he stood up and told Zhao that if there was nothing else, he'd get going. Zhao grabbed his hand and asked him if he was really going to leave without saying anything after he'd been told all of that. He questioned whether Kai wasn't at least curious about him or the organization behind him. But Kai replied that he was not interested. Then he told Zhao that it was just like novel logic. Once he knew the secret of the organization, he'd either join or be killed, locked up, or brainwashed. Zhao punched his head while telling him to stop watching so much television. He asked Zhao if he wouldn't be in danger even if he didn't join after hearing it out. Zhao replied, "Of course not. We are soldiers. We'll have you sign a non-disclosure contract. What you're saying is complete nonsense." He forcefully replied, "Fine," and told Zhao that he'd listen to what he had to say. Then Zhao handed the contract to him. Zhao proceeded by telling him that after discovering Leviathan, the managers of Xia established a military organization specially made to prevent any mythical being from invading. That organization was called the 139 Special Being Counter Group. More and more mythical beings were discovered, and more Forbidden Rune wielders were found. They tried establishing connections with a few gods and started training special fighters. Currently, that organization is known as the Night Watcher. Zhao proudly told him that as a soldier, their mission was to protect Xia and prevent the invasion of any gods and monsters. Additionally, the existence of the Night Watchers was to protect the people from harm. Then Zhao asked him if such a noble and cool organization wasn't just right for young people to protect their country. He asked Kai if he wanted to join, but still, Kai replied that it was noble and cool, and he truly respected him, but he couldn't join. Zhao asked him why. He looked at the moon and replied that he had an aunt and a cousin, and for the past 10 years, his aunt had worked hard for Ah Jin and his disability, which had affected her health. His aunt is stubborn because she always pushes herself too much, nearly crying out from the pain. He was sitting right across from her and she believed that he couldn't see. His aunt had lived too cautiously and far too tiringly. His cousin, smart and a source of her pride, was unfortunately too young to shoulder the responsibility of the household. Thus, he continued his education, working hard to earn money to care for the home. He made a promise to himself that he would buy his aunt and cousin a big house one day, freeing her from her laborious job at the factory. He told Zhao that over the past 10 years, they had never abandoned him despite his disability, and now that his eyesight was restored, he had no intention of leaving them behind. He wanted to stay by their side, protecting their home every step of the way. Zhao, surprised by his response, looked into Kai's determined eyes and smiled. He advised him to go home, acknowledging that he had misunderstood him. Kai waved goodbye and expressed his gratitude to Zhao for sharing so much with him before signing the non-disclosure agreement. Once home, he undressed, musing aloud about the complexities of a world riddled with gods and monsters. He spent his days conversing with an ordinary man and his nights curing patients in his dreams. Suddenly, something fell out of his jacket pocket. He examined the item with confusion, realizing it was from Zhao Kencheng, and wondered if it belonged to that man. On the back of the item were the words, "When the darkness strikes, I will stand before millions of swords facing the abyss, with blood smearing the sky." He found it to be a powerful statement, speculating if it was the slogan of the Night Watchers. Later, in the superintendent's room, someone was throwing items out the door, declaring them unnecessary. He put on his doctor's coat and walked towards the room to start the day's treatments. Nix called him Hypnos and told him to give it a try. Even though he had visited the hospital and researched Greek mythologies, he still had no idea how to treat Nix. According to the mythologies, Nix was one of the most ancient and powerful Greek gods, mother to a large brood including Thanatos, the god of death, Hyonos, the god of sleep, the god of light, the Fates, Moros, the god of deadly fate, and many others. He watched her, wondering if perhaps she missed her children so dearly that she was mistaking the vases and bottles for them, or if something had happened to her children that had upset her to such a degree. Nix mentioned that Thanatos had always been a troublemaker since his youth, and she vowed to punish him upon his return. She then broke into tears, lamenting over the 3,000 years that had passed without any sign of Thanatos. Approaching her, he pondered over the thought that the great goddess of the night was also a pitiful mother. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He knew what to do next. He walks closer to Nix, looking at her, fully aware that her illness originates from her longing for her children. Seeing everything around her as her progeny, he wonders if it might be possible to reach her heart by embracing this idea. Next, he hugs Nix, referring to her as mother. He assures her of his return, a revelation that moves Nix to tears and prompts her to let go of the object she's been holding. Embracing him, Nix welcomes him back joyously as if he were truly her child. The system indicates that he has fulfilled 3% of the required goal, leading him to heave a sigh of relief. Progress is finally in sight. After releasing him, Nyx hands him a cup of tea under the assumption that he is Thanatos. He checks the system and notes that it is allocating a random reward from Nyx's powers due to his progress. He presses the draw button, and as the draw board activates, he muses that it is fitting for Nyx to be the goddess of the night, given the correlation between her powers and her name. As he peruses the board, the phrase extraordinary reproduction in one of the options catches his eye, leading him to question if this is considered a godly power. The indicator ceases its circular motion, landing on Starry Night Dancer. Kai considers this to not sound particularly formidable, but he is relieved to have avoided extraordinary reproduction. Nyx presents him with an item, explaining that it's something he cherishes. Upon inspection, he discovers it's the Starry Night Dancer. He reaches out, grasps it, and the power enters his body, causing him to feel a transformative shift in his physiology. He experiences a sensation of being cleansed, from his soul to his physical form. Moments later, he successfully assimilates the Starry Night Dancer power, earning the ability to communicate with nocturnal creatures. Additionally, during the night, his suppression over other beings intensifies. His presence becomes less noticeable, and his speed, strength, resilience, and recovery abilities amplify to 5 times their usual capabilities. He is taken aback by the potency of the Starry Night Dancer, considering the power to be superhuman. The strength, 5 times greater than a normal human's, is impressive. Even if his original strength was average, a 5-fold increase places him at the peak of human potential, equipping him to protect his family. Believing he is Thanatos, Nyx questions him about his younger brother's longing for him and encourages him to share a hug with the sibling, to which he agrees. She presents him with a Haloprodol for God capsule, surprising him. Without delay, he places the capsule on the table and hastily exits, reassuring Nyx that he will return shortly. A few minutes later, he arrives at a room, gripping the door handle firmly. Pushing the door open, he is astounded by the abundant medication within, leaving him perplexed and in awe. The next morning, his alarm clock rang to wake him up. He stood up and looked out the window happily, declaring that it had been the best sleep he'd had in a very long time. He felt refreshed and relaxed. He walked down the stairs, and when he reached the first floor, he saw his aunt, ready to leave. He asked her if she was going to work that early. His aunt replied affirmatively and explained to him that the new materials had arrived at the factory, and they had asked her to begin work on them as soon as possible. Before his aunt left, she looked at him and told him she would be gone and that he should have breakfast with his cousin. He was shocked to see his aunt's face. He closed his eyes tightly and slowly opened them. As his aunt walked outside, she told him not to be late, but before she had completely left, he called out to her. His aunt looked back and asked why. He told her that he could now see, surprising her and bringing her to tears of joy. She immediately hugged him, tearfully telling him it was wonderful news. His cousin, hearing their exchange, happily chimed in, saying it was fantastic that he could finally see. Later, at Kangnan City's 6th high school, his classmates called his name, leading him to ask why. The girls told him that he was very handsome and that his eyes were beautiful, but he simply remained quiet, looking at Yaifai and Young, who were equally silent in their chairs. One of his classmates asked him how his eyes had healed, claiming it was unbelievable. He awkwardly replied that his eyes were on the verge of recovery anyway, and that he had visited the hospital the day before. When break time arrived, on the rooftop, Young and Yaifai bowed to him, apologizing. They told him they were genuinely sorry, explaining they were too afraid to think clearly back then, so they had run away, leaving him and Kayan behind, which resulted in her death. He reassured them that there was no need to apologize. Then he walked past them, telling them that running away from danger was a natural instinct, and that if he had been in their position, he probably would have run even faster. Young asked him if he really didn't blame them, and if he had encountered those guys as well and signed a non-disclosure contract. Young then explained that those people had approached him that night and nearly scared him to death, but Yaifai claimed that he actually wanted to join them. He asked Yaifai why he would want to join them, and Yaifai responded that being an ordinary person was dull. He stated that many men dreamed of joining a secret organization and battling enemies hidden within human society. He told Yaifai that he was romanticizing it, but the truth was, he could die on his first mission, his parents would never know, and he'd leave their world all alone. He made this point as he walked toward the exit door. Later that night, he stood in front of their door, noticing it was going to rain. He opened the door, announcing his return. However, when he lifted his head to look inside their home, he was shocked to see Zhao sitting in their living room. He panicked, asking Zhao how he had found his home. Zhao revealed the object he'd had in his pocket previously and explained that he had slipped the tracker into his pocket. He walked past Zhao, reminding him that he had already stated he wouldn't be joining them. Zhao displayed a significant amount of money on the table, telling him he knew that. but he wasn't there for that reason. He looked at the money, asking Zhao what it meant, but Zhao simply placed a cigarette in his mouth and asked if he minded him smoking. He replied assertively that he did mind, leaving Zhao stunned in surprise. Zhao informed him that his father passed away when he was 6 and his mother had to work 2 jobs to raise him. Despite this, he managed to maintain good grades, which were sufficient for him to become a village head. However, he chose to join the army despite his mother's objections. The day he left, his mother stood by the door, silently watching him depart. For a moment, he truly wanted to stay, but ultimately, he turned his back on his mother. In those days, he resolved to earn military awards and return to his hometown clad in his uniform, medals displayed on his chest. However, he later joined the Special Forces and was promoted, leading to a transfer to the Night Watcher department due to his exceptional combat skills. He had originally planned on becoming the village head after retiring, tending to his mother's health and providing her with companionship. However, after joining the Night Watchers, that dream was abandoned. But he was unique. He was more intelligent and sensible than the others and held his own views. If he chose to stay and protect his family, that was commendable, and he should walk that path with pride, leaving the world saving to others. Zhao then advised him to use the money to purchase something useful for his aunt and cousin, as it would ease his life. He refused, but Zhao placed the money in his hand and insisted that it was for his aunt, so he had to accept it. Returning the money to Zhao, he explained that his aunt would also refuse it. He vehemently stated that even though they were poor, they held onto their dignity, and would not accept money from soldiers who had risked their lives for it. Pointing to his eyes, he explained to Zhao that his sight had recovered and he could manage his home by himself. Defeated, Zhao stood up and commented on his stubbornness. Nevertheless, if that was his choice, he would respect it and leave. Outside, the rain was pouring heavily and Zhao advised him to take shelter. Shaking his hand, Zhao wished him a bright future, and he reciprocated by expressing his hopes for Zhao to earn the honors he desired. Zhao then began to walk away. At that moment, his aunt arrived and questioned who Zhao was and whether he knew him. He simply told her that Zhao was a plumber. Shortly after, Zhao sat outside a shop, staring at his tracker. Suddenly, someone alerted him to an emergency, causing him to inquire about the situation. He stood up in shock when he was informed that a group of ghost masks was heading his way. The person on the other end explained that they had found traces of their blood, and judging by their movement, they were either heading towards the old city or the downtown area. Immediately, Zhao sprinted in the rain, informing his team that he was currently in the old city area, and asking about their plan. The man responded that Hong Ying was leading a group to support him, and his mission was to evacuate the old city area as swiftly as possible. However, Zhao questioned why Hong Ying was involved when she was injured. Meanwhile, downtown, the Night Watchers tried to convince the people to evacuate, but they reported to their captain that the population was too large to evacuate everyone. Therefore, if the King of Ghost Masks appeared there, the consequences would be severe. Zhao, in a fit of anger, questioned his team as to whether the dwindling population in the Old Town area justified their neglect. One of his colleagues advised him to regain his composure, assuring him that they had not abandoned the Old Town area. The team member further suggested that if the King of Ghost Masks indeed made an appearance there, Zhao shouldn't confront it directly. This entity was beyond Zhao's ability to overcome, and thus, he was recommended to use non-commandment space to stall it, while the main forces prepared to intervene. Absorbing this information, Zhao acknowledged his understanding. With a sense of urgency, he opened the truck, aware that non-commandment space would not confine the King of Ghost Masks. If this entity were to be exposed to the public, it could incite widespread panic. Under such circumstances, any assistance provided to the Old Town area could be considered generous, leaving no room for further complaints. Holding onto a street post, he launched himself towards a particular destination, knowing that he must evacuate the area as quickly as possible. Upon reaching the Kai apartment building, he found himself reflecting on past memories associated with the place. Checking the time, he speculated that the reciting family was probably engaged in their evening meal. Suddenly, a peculiar odor hit him. He halted in his tracks, speculating whether the scent could be that of a decaying corpse. His attention then shifted to the nearby canal, its lid brimming over with dark, murky water. The sight of the black water flooding the area made Zhao realize he had stumbled upon a major, albeit undesirable, discovery. Wrenching the street post from its place, he reported to his team that he had located the King of Ghost Masks in the Old Town area. His team swiftly responded, announcing that the main forces were moving towards the Old Town area. Dying and her team were also on their way and would arrive in roughly 10 minutes. They cautioned Zhao against engaging the King of Ghost Masks alone and reiterated that he should use the non-commandment space to restrain it. Tossing the street post with all his might, Zhao informed his team that the non-commandment space wouldn't contain the King of Ghost Masks for even a minute without someone inside it. Regardless, his team maintained that he must avoid any direct combat at all costs. Zhao hurled another street post, insisting to his team that it was too late to evacuate everyone. His team reminded him that fatalities and injuries caused by the mystical were occurring everywhere, every second. The Night Watchers were not gods, they couldn't prevent them all. They reasoned that losing an old teammate to the King of Ghost Masks wasn't worth the risk. Undeterred, Zhao slammed the street post onto the ground, providing no response to his teammates. He smeared his blood onto the street post as his teammates urged him to stay calm and avoid going rogue. Activating his power, he asked Xiangnan, one of his teammates, if he remembered the oath they'd taken. Suddenly, black water burst forth from the canal behind him, and the Ghost King mask slowly emerged. Zhao informed Xiangnan that in this moment, he wouldn't have millions supporting him. Instead, he carried the weight of one child's entire world. Using his sword, he blocked the monster's attack. The clash resonated loudly due to the force involved, causing water in their surroundings to rise into the air. Zhao activated his Forbidden Ruins non-commandment space, the street post releasing a powerful red light and trapping him and the monsters within. Moments later, they disappeared, leaving behind the ravaged canal and a drizzling street post. Meanwhile, within their apartment, his aunt placed a slice of pork on his rice, informing him that it was a special day and he should eat more, not sparing any for leftovers. His aunt's call caught him by surprise, to which he awkwardly replied that he understood. He placed the pork on Jin's plate, reminding him that he was growing and needed to eat more. Noticing Jin's distant look, he called his name. His aunt asked Jin where his mind had wandered, questioning whether he was picking at his food or no longer cared for meat. This prompted Jin to start eating immediately. Kai looked around, asking where is Lil Black Leprosy. His aunt pointed to their dog on the terrace. Approaching it, he asked what was happening and if something was amiss outside. Looking down, he spotted the street post pin on the ground. A realization dawned on him, and he hurriedly ran outside, informing his aunt that he needed to handle something and would be stepping out. On the other hand, Zhao opened his lighter and lit up a cigarette. He smoked it and remarked that it had been an unlucky day. Then, he acknowledged the captain's strength and the extent of the hurt inflicted, implying that the captain had been going easy on him during their spar. Nevertheless, a severely injured monster from the Chuan boundary still posed a significant threat. Gripping his sword tightly, he leapt to attack the beast, flicking away his cigarette in the process. He was uncertain how many more blows he could sustain. The monster lunged at him. Fortunately, he evaded the attack, then brandished his sword in a continuous assault. The creature growled angrily while under his barrage, but his strikes failed to even scratch its hide. He leapt again, attempting to pierce the monster with his sword, but the blade's tip shattered. He realized that piercing it was impossible and that the boundary difference was far too large. The monster retaliated, sending him flying. He managed to land on his feet, but a fit of coughing overtook him as he spat out blood, a result of the creature's assault. It led him to question whether possessing strength was such an important factor. He furiously brandished his broken sword at the monster, challenging it over the significance of its mythical status. The creature roared, activating its power, and Zhao was taken aback as the monster released Forbidden Runes. According to Forbidden Rune Sequence 176, the ghost mask faces Earth, deceiving all beings below its boundary within the rune's range into experiencing a reverse space concept. He felt himself becoming progressively weaker. The monster leapt to attack, its sharp claws ready to strike. He managed to dodge the first attack by twisting his body to the side, but he failed to evade the subsequent blow and was hit. Despite the hit, he maintained his footing, knowing that if the fight continued in this manner, he would undoubtedly perish. He grasped his sword and raised it, aiming it at the monster. He closed his eyes to concentrate, steadying his stance. He focused on predicting the monster's next move, feeling the next attack coming from behind. He immediately swung his sword backward and parried the monster's strike. The force of the blow pushed him backward, but he still teased the monster, asking if it was surprised. He warned it about the danger of the Forbidden Rune, acknowledging that usually it would have gotten him by now. However, he added, that day was unfortunate for the monster because it was raining. Zhao swings his sword toward the monster, declaring that it might fool him, but it can't trick the rain. As he leaps to attack, he boasts, I don't mean to brag, but if I had Forbidden Ruins, you'd already be dead. He aims his sword for its head, but his weapon gets stuck. The monster immediately retaliates with a punch, sending him flying and coughing up blood. Upon hitting the ground, Zhao recalls the military head's words. The badge is the symbol of a night watcher, and it is also your last resort. The ghost and god summoner stored within it can trade a person's life for an immense amount of spiritual power. Even those without a forbidden ruin can awaken one at the end of their life, so use it only when necessary. Staring at his badge, Zhao thinks it's about time. Suddenly, he hears Kai calling his name from outside. Kai tells him, I know you're in there, so open the door and let me in. Kiai knocks hard on the street post while calling for Zhao, who then asks him why he isn't eating dinner at home. Kiai retorts that it's none of Zhao's business and adds, "I know you're squaring off against that King of Ghosts mask in there. I can fight too, so let me in." But Zhao corrects him, saying it's not a mere ghost mask but the King of Ghosts mask itself. "It's 2 boundaries above you," he warns. "How do you plan to fight it with your current skills?" Zhao also reminds Kiai of his fear of death and asks him why he is there. Then, he tells him to go home and have dinner. "You have my word," Zhao promises, "as long as I, Zhao Kencheng, am here, that thing will never lay a finger on your home." Kiai attempted to throw himself against the barrier, insisting to Zhao that while he didn't want to die, he also didn't want to owe him anything. Then, he teased Zhao, asking if he aspired to play the hero because he wouldn't agree to such a role. Kiai also tried to kick the barrier, telling Zhao that dinner could wait until the King of Ghost Mask was defeated, at which point they could dine together. On the other hand, Zhao was harshly thrown against the barrier. Zhao slowly tried to rise, advising Kiai not to bother since he couldn't break the non-commandment space anyway. It would be equivalent to suicide if he was inside, and the only way he could enter was posthumously. Out of anger, Kiai punched a street pole, but it remained immovable. He looked tearfully at the red street post shimmering in the drizzle before him. Zhao looked back, wondering if Kiai had left. As he removed his gloves, he told Kiai it was best he returned home for dinner, and left the remaining tasks to them, the Night Watchers. Then he clicked his badge, revealing a sharp pin. He stabbed it into his neck, questioning the monster if it knew how long he'd been waiting for this day. As blood trickled from his neck, a powerful red light erupted from his body while he activated his forbidden ruins. The monster charged at him, but he remained still, activating his Obliterate Moon and aiming the huge sword at the monster. The creature leaped above him, and he swung his sword upwards, striking its leg and severing it, causing the beast to plummet to the ground. He strode closer to it, teasingly asserting that he, Zhao Kencheng, was an unparalleled genius. The monster retaliated with a surge of energy, ensnaring him in a vast barrier. Unperturbed, he swung his sword downward, shattering the barrier into fragments. Simultaneously, he sliced the monster's claw in 2, leaving it astounded. He glared at it, anger etched on his face, but then a piercing pain shot through his heart. Collapsing to the ground, he realized his time was dwindling. He needed to end this quickly. Despite the pain, the monster hissed in fury. Even in his own agony, Zhao Kencheng promptly rose to his feet, knowing he had to act swiftly. He darted toward the monster, which charged at him in return. They met in the center, and he unleashed a flurry of sword strikes, employing his Obliterate Moon power. The monster parried his onslaught with its formidable defenses, but several of his strikes found their mark, leaving it taken aback. Exhaustion was setting in, yet he maintained his relentless assault. The monster retaliated with a powerful punch that sent him sprawling across the ground, tumbling until he finally skidded to a stop. The monster sneered at him with a teasing smile. However, its arm suddenly emitted a brilliant red light before exploding into fragments. Zhao Kencheng slowly sat up, smirking as he taunted the creature, informing it they were now even with only 1 arm each. Zhao vomits a large amount of blood, and he notices that he can no longer feel the pain. He tries to stand up, knowing that he isn't dead yet, and that the Forbidden Ruin is still there. He can still fight. Because of his strong will and the continued presence of the King of Ghost Masks, he successfully stands. He refuses to succumb to death. Suddenly, he hears his red street post shattering into pieces. Turning to look, he is about to question how it broke off but is taken aback upon seeing Kiai. He asks Kiai how he managed to get in. Kiai replies that a mere glare caused it to open. Kiai is relieved that the nighttime has triggered the Starry Night Dancer's power, allowing the Seraph's divine power to break the non-commandment space. However, this feat required some spiritual energy. Kiai moves forward, asking Zhao if all he needs to do is help him. Zhao, pointing his sword at Kiai's throat, bluntly tells him to stop talking nonsense. Zhao then orders him to step aside. Kiai tries to convince Zhao that he can assist, but he stops talking when he notices that Zhao has suffered internal injuries. Zhao informs him that all he needs is 1 swing. He tells Kiai that he can help after that, leaving Kiai speechless. Zhao approaches the monster, instructing Kiai to watch his next move closely because it is going to be impressive. He leaps to attack the monster, and it lunges to attack him too. They meet in the center, but Zhao manages to dodge its attack while simultaneously swinging his sword. The monster's head is severed, and its body slowly collapses onto the ground. Exhausted, Zhao wins and manages to stay on his feet when he lands. However, he soon feels the pain and falls to the ground. Kiai, shocked, rushes to hold Zhao, warning him that he'll die. Zhao reassures him that it's okay. He knows, and he believes that experiencing the Forbidden Ruins before death is totally worth it. Zhao then lifts up the badge to show Kiai, proudly declaring that he did it and reminding him of the phrase, "The sword to the abyss, blood smears the sky." Kai flicks open a lighter, allowing Zhao to bring his cigarette to the flame. Once lit, Zhao places the cigarette between his lips. With pride in his voice, he asks Kai if he had seen him behead the King of Ghost Masks with a single swing. Kai acknowledges that he did, in fact, see everything. Zhao brags further, stating that the wretched captain, whom others couldn't kill, had fallen to him. He insists that such a contribution should earn him the rank of general, to which Kai concurs. However, Kai soberly reminds Zhao that he hasn't yet ascended to the position of general and, therefore, he mustn't die just yet. Zhao merely asks Kai whether his swing was impressive. Tearfully, Kai confirms that it was more impressive than anything he has ever seen. Zhao's cigarette tumbles to the ground, and his body grows still, causing Kai to weep in silence. Suddenly, they notice movement behind them. Something stirs from within the remains of the monster. As it crawls toward the monster's body, Kai confesses to Zhao that he isn't afraid of death. He questions whether a blind child thrown into an asylum would fear dying. He reveals to Zhao that he had attempted to end his own life multiple times, only to be repeatedly pulled back by a metaphorical light, the light of his family. Despite his strong dislike of owing others, he acknowledges Zhao's sacrifices. As he clutches Zhao's badge, he questions how he might repay the man. Unnoticed by Kai, the monster reanimates behind him. He quickly grabs Zhao's sword and raises it. Turning, he finds himself facing the monster. It hisses in fury as Kai maneuvers around it. He activates his Starry Night Dancer power and thrusts the sword toward the beast, knowing it to be the main body of Ghostface. But his attack is blocked, leading him to wonder if it's due to a difference in their boundaries. Nevertheless, he vows to destroy it, even if it requires tens or hundreds of stabs. As the monster's face slowly cracks and disintegrates, Kai propels himself backward to gather momentum for another furious stab. He continuously stabbed the monster, slowly forcing it to the ground. He mustered all his remaining strength for a final strike, and a powerful golden light emanated from the beast. Shielding his face, he leaped backward just as the creature exploded into fragments. The severed head still managed to hiss at him. Grabbing Zhao's sword, he plunged it in, exterminating the creature's last vestiges of life. Pausing to catch his breath, he acknowledged how close a call it had been. His physical and spiritual reserves were depleted. Clutching Zhao's sword tightly, he turned to his companion, acknowledging that without Zhao's prior battle, he could never have bested the Ghost Mask King. He strapped Zhao's sword to his back, confessing to Zhao that there were only 3 individuals he owed apologies to: his aunt, who had toiled for 10 years, his cousin, whom he'd let down during that time, and Zhao, the man who had saved his family. He tenderly took Zhao's hand, hoisting him onto his shoulder. He confessed to Zhao that he had saved his entire world, and in repayment, he pledged to protect Zhao's world for the next decade. With Zhao in tow, he started walking. The Night Watcher found them, and shock crossed their faces as they questioned whether Zhao was deceased. Kai introduced himself as Lin Kai and declared he was triumphantly returning with General Zhao Kencheng. Meanwhile, in their apartment, his aunt sighed with worry. Jin suggested to his mother that they should proceed with their meal. His mother, fraught with worry, asked why Kai had left abruptly during the meal and questioned whether he had gotten himself entangled in something dangerous. Jin tried to assuage his mother's concerns, assuring her that Kai would be fine and that, as a grown-up, he likely had his own affairs to handle. His mother nodded in agreement, her worry easing into a smile at the realization of Kai's growth. The next morning, near the Peace Funeral Home, in an unnamed building, someone asked Kai if he was the individual old Zhao had found, if he was the Seraph's agent, Lin Kai. He responded confidently in the affirmative. He reminded the person he was talking to that he had already clearly explained that Zhao Kencheng had activated the non-commandment space and fought the King of Ghost Masks alone until they perished together. Wu Xiangnan, the co-leader of Night Watcher Team 136 stationed in Kangnan City, asked him how he had managed to enter the non-commandment space. The response was that he had merely glared at it, and it had opened up. Kimo inquired if he could detail some aspects of the battle, particularly how Zhao Kencheng had defeated the King of Ghost Masks. He responded that Zhao had decapitated the King of Ghost Masks with a single swing of his sword, creating a silvery white, glowing crescent moon shape with the motion. Upon hearing this, Ying asked about the silvery white crescent moon. Amidst the confusion, someone stood up on their chair and shouted that it was the Obliterate Moon. The man elaborated that Zhao had used the Ghost and God Summoner and activated his own forbidden ruins. Kimo was surprised to hear this, as he knew that the Obliterate Moon Sequence 83 was a high threat level forbidden ruin. Yin sorrowfully admitted that she had never thought her uncle Zhao was right. The man speculated that even Zhao couldn't have believed it when he awakened his forbidden ruin, and dying added that Zhao would definitely have bragged about how his forbidden ruins were the coolest and strongest. Upon hearing this, Zhao's team was moved to tears, fell silent, and felt anger because of his death. But then, the man encouraged them to stop standing around and suggested that they do a round of self-introductions. Xiangnan introduced himself to Kai and introduced the man behind him as their captain. Chen Mui. Hong Yin identified herself as the assault striker of Night Watcher Team 136. When Kimo introduced himself as the support wing of the same team, the lady, Si Zionin, who was in charge of battle support and also worked as a military surgeon, introduced herself next, followed by Lang Xuan, who introduced himself as distant firing support. Zionin mentioned another problem. They had found some strange burn marks on the body of the king's ghost masks, but Mui declared that they had finished asking questions about Zhao Kencheng. Then he sat in front of Kiai and announced to his team that it was time to inquire about Lin Kiai. When Mui asked why he wanted to join the Night Watchers, he replied that he wanted to join to repay the debt he owed. Additionally, he had promised Zhao that he would join the Night Watchers for 10 years, after which he would take his leave. Xiangnan, angry, retorted that the Night Watchers were not community volunteers, and once people had joined, there was no right for them to leave, so his departure would depend on whether he was truly capable. He understood this and acknowledged that it was on him if he couldn't leave after 10 years. Mui happily told him that he understood his case, leaving the other speechless. Then, Mui grabbed the application form and handed it to him. As he did so, he explained that official training would start after a month. The Night Watchers are a semi-military organization, so every rookie has to go through a 1-year training camp before officially joining. There, they would learn combat techniques, gun usage, tactics, exploration of forbidden ruins, and more. Before the training camp, however, he could only be considered a temporary teammate of their team. He replied that it was just as he had expected. Mui then informed him that temporary teammates did not receive food and housing. Confused, he asked where he would live for that month. Ying placed her hand on his shoulder, telling him he could live at her place, which was quite large. She assured him not to worry, saying that now he was one of them, she would take care of him. Shyly, he thanked Ying. But then, Kimo grabbed his shoulder, telling him they should go as he would show him around. He also asked Ying to stop teasing their rookie. As they walked along the corridor, Kimo called him aside and seriously asked if he could ask him a favor. Kimo stopped walking, turned to face him, and asked if he could live with him at Hong Ying's place. He had wanted to stay there for quite some time. He was shocked and didn't know what to say. But then Kimo laughed, telling him that he was just joking. He should not panic and should feel free to ask if he had any questions. Yet, Kai knew that Kimo was definitely serious just then. As they walked upstairs, he asked Kimo why there were only 6 people in the Night Watchers. Kimo laughed, complimenting him on his keen observation skills. He explained that before arriving, he had thought the Night Watchers were a large organization, akin to military bases filled with jets and planes. They reached the rooftop, where Kimo explained that the Night Watchers were different from the army. The centralized military management he was talking about had a fatal flaw, which was the low efficiency of their mobility. Kimo gave him an example. If mythical creatures were found in Kangnan City, it would take at least 2 days from the moment local authorities confirmed their presence, sent a message to the military base for verification, and then dispatched the armies to start the investigation. Kai realized that many people could die within 2 days, to which Kimo agreed. He explained that the best strategy was to station a Night Watchers team in every city. That way, if a mythical creature was discovered, the team could start their investigation immediately. Their team, Team 136, was the one stationed in Kangnan City. Kai understood that this was the reason they had clear divisions of work. They all had different areas of expertise. Kimo agreed, explaining that from battle support to leadership, everyone excelled in their own part and could work together for an ideal team composition. In an emergency, special forces would also be called for support. Besides the station team in a city, there were also 4 special forces units. Kimo informed him that when a situation exceeded what the local Night Watchers could handle, these units would come to help. Above all, the Night Watchers had 5 individuals whose strength was beyond human. When he asked Kimo what he meant by beyond human, Kimo replied that these 5 were known as the Swordsman, the Knight, the Honorable, the Void, and the Pedagogue. The following day, he glanced at the paper, assuming it should be there. His shock was palpable when he saw it and realized that Ying was, in fact, a wealthy woman. Then, Ying's words echoed in his mind, stating her house was quite large. Upon pressing the doorbell button, the gate swung open, revealing a property far grander than quite large, a stark contrast to Ying's understatement. When Ying heard the door, she hurried down the stairs, assuring him she was on her way. Without hesitation, she pulled him inside, questioning why he'd taken so long. While dragging him inside, she explained that the house hadn't been tidied up that day, hence its slight disarray, and expressed her hope that he wouldn't mind. Then, she declared her intention to find him some slippers to wear. Moments later, he found himself comfortably wearing the provided slippers, much to Ying's delight. Zionin peeked out and called for Ying. As Zionin descended the stairs, she queried if Kai was present. but Kai turned the question back at her, asking why she was there too. Ying gently guided him upstairs, explaining that Xiaonan found it hard to adjust to dorm life and thus typically lived with her. She suggested that they head to his room. Feeling slightly awkward, he asked about her parents, wondering if his presence would be an inconvenience. Ying, with a tinge of sadness in her voice, responded negatively, revealing that her parents had joined an exploration team and vanished in the mist 5 years prior. He fell silent, regretting his question. A minute later, Ying opened a door, declaring it his room, which she had tidied. She also informed him that his blue towel and toothbrush were in the bathroom, cautioning him not to mix them up. He stepped into his new room, acknowledging her instructions with a simple "alright." Ying sternly reminded him to knock first before entering either Xiaonan's or her room. She warned him against harboring any ill intentions, flexing her fingers as a gentle threat. Pointing to her muscles, she reminded him that the spearhead of their team was her strength, not something to be trifled with. He assured her he understood, merely inquiring if there was any pen and paper available. This made Ying curious about his need for them. Meanwhile, in their apartment building, Kimo and Mui rang the doorbell of their apartment. Kiai's aunt happily answered the door, expecting Kiai. Kimo inquired if she was Kiai's guardian, Mrs. Wang Feng. When Fang queried about their identities, Mui responded that they were sent by the military and political office. However, Kimo interrupted his captain, clarifying to Fang that they were merely responsible for recruits joining the army. This left Fang perplexed about their mention of joining the military. They gave the paper to Fang. She panicked and asked them why Kai had suddenly decided to join the army when he had never mentioned it before. However, Jin told her that Kai did indeed inform him. Jin explained to his mother that Kai had spoken to him about it in secret, saying that joining the army was his greatest dream. He conveyed that the issues with his eyes had only temporarily distracted him from this dream. Fang couldn't believe it. She felt it was utterly unexpected and expressed her concern, saying that Kai had just recovered his eyesight, and yet was now in a rush to enlist. She wondered what would happen if something went wrong with Kiai. Kimo reassured Fang that there was no need to worry. They had conducted a thorough examination of Lin Kai's eyes, so there should be no future complications. Then, Mui presented Fang with a large sum of money, explaining it was Lin Kai's subsidy for joining the army. Fang was astounded by the amount of money, but Kimo clarified that a new policy had recently been introduced to improve the welfare of soldiers. Hence, Lin Kai's team was receiving special subsidies as well. Fang asked Kimo several questions: if Kai would be safe, where the troops were stationed, if it was far, whether it was cold there, if it was a safe place, whether Kai could acclimate to the environment, how long Kai would be there, and if she could call him. Kimo assured her she could call, that everything was fine, and asked Fang if she could release his hand first. Later, they exited the building. Kimo informed Kiai, who had been waiting outside, that it had been a tiresome task, more exhausting than going on missions. Mu reported that Kai's aunt had accepted the explanation and taken the money. Kiai expressed his relief, but Mui pointed out that it was Kai's prepaid salary for a year. He questioned Kiai about what he would do if he gave all of it away. Kai simply responded that he would manage and it was just for a year. Mu grabbed his shoulder and suggested that if he wasn't busy, he could always come to the office for meals. This led Kai to question Mu, thinking he didn't provide food and accommodations. Mu walked away, replying that normally he didn't, and Kimo joined him, bidding Kai goodbye. Once they were in the car, Mui clarified that he wouldn't normally provide food, except when he was cooking. This surprised Kai and made him think for a moment. Then, they drove off, leaving him alone. He called his aunt, who told him that he should have informed her about his decision to join the army earlier. If he truly wanted to go, she wouldn't have stopped him. He apologized to his aunt, admitting his mistake. Later, in his dream, he saw Nix outside, swinging on a swing and humming. She stopped when she noticed him approaching and excitedly exclaimed that he had arrived. She raised her hand, calling him her child, and asked if he had come to see her. He affirmed, mentioning it was time for her medicine. He handed her 2 pills, informing Nix that once she took her medicine, all her children would return. She immediately tossed the medicine into her mouth and swallowed happily. He sat next to her, sighing in frustration. Nix offered him some tea, asking if something was bothering him. He accepted the tea, acknowledging that something was indeed on his mind. She informed him that she would give him a gift if that was the case, leading him to ask what it was. She extended her hand, saying she would give him her bracelet to wear. However, upon realizing her bracelet was missing, she began searching for it, leaving Kai speechless. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.